pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roxanne, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Davis?
Here.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Here.
Mr. Eichelberg?
Here.
Mr. France?
Here.
Mr. Marshall?
Here.
Mrs. McGrattan?
Here.
Mr. Soms? Mr. Sullivan?
Here.
Mrs. McGrattan? 7 here, 2 absent.
Okay, we have a quorum. Next item on the agenda is residents and property owners wishing to address the council. Do we have any tonight? Okay, seeing none. Committee, commission, and board reports. We have none on the agenda for tonight. Comments of town councilors. Okay, moving. Oh, briskly. Oh, until Councilor Davis raised her hand.
I didn't want to go first. About 6 months before Irene came to town, I made a couple of comments about how often we lose electricity, especially down in Gales Ferry. And I kind of wasn't received very warmly. It was like I was whining. But I would like to whine some more because it's really gotten out of hand. We are losing our power. Somebody in Gales Ferry loses their power at least once a week. Of course, last night, it's okay. It was windy, I get that. And so a whole section of people lost power last night for a few hours. But it's been at least once a week for the last 2 months. So I hope that I will be received more favorably this time. And on a more positive note, for those that got to see Santa this Christmas when the Ledyard Fire Company and Gales Ferry Fire Company came through town, just wanted to read something that was posted on one of my social media sites by Carolyn Cedar, who said, "I've never seen anything like this anywhere I lived before. So when I heard the sirens, I was worried. I looked out my door to see Santa waving at me. Absolutely the highlight to my day." So I just would like to thank the Ledyard Fire folks because I just think it's a really nice thing to do and one we all look forward to every year.
Thank you. Are there any other councilors? Yes, Councilor France.
I'd like to take the opportunity to recognize 3 of our students from Ledyard High School. I had the pleasure of attending a Rotary breakfast where 3 students were participating in the 4-way speech contest, one of which happened to be my daughter. The 3 speeches were excellent. Kim Cotting was first, Marguerite France took second, Elliot Pillsbury was 3rd place. And they all did a great job, so I would take the time to recognize them tonight.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'd like to take this opportunity to wish everybody in Ledyard a Happy New Year. Next we have communications. We have a communications list. We actually passed out a paper copy tonight because we passed one out to all the councilors? No. Oh, you loaded it up. All right, so it is actually on the website for everybody to see. Are there any additions or comments? Okay, next, subcommittee and liaison reports. Administration Committee. Councilor Eichelberg.
The Administration Committee has not met since the last meeting. Our next regular meeting will be on January 11th.
Okay, thank you. Community Services Committee.
We have not met since our last council meeting.
Okay, it's probably going to be the dominant theme tonight is finance.
Same. Our next meeting will be
Information technology.
Tuesday we meet, same.
Okay. Land use planning, public works.
We actually had a site walk of the Clark Farm on the 16th of December. Members Soms and myself were present. We had Ed Tynan, who was representing the girls' Little League softball. Don Greasy, our Parks and Recs director, and several other citizens, and the chairman of the Parks and Recs Commission, Bob Gunnels, as well as Mr. Walter Major, who is currently farming the property. So we just walked around, and Ed Tynan had just kind of like just showed us physically on the property where they were interested in placing the softball fields, and they'll be further discussed at our meeting Tuesday.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Councilor Dombrowski on that? Okay. Board of Education liaison?
No report. We'll be attending their meeting on Wednesday.
Thank you. Do we have other liaison reports? Anyone? Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you.
Good evening.
Mr. Chairman. Good evening. A few things related to Council Davis's comment. I've had a conversation with Donna Barber Dunn, who is our CLMP representative. She's actually, I don't know her exact title, but she is very much a coordinator for the entire area, but she also happens to be our representative. And I did call her this week concerning the outages on Gales Ferry. That was the day that I believe the senior center went out. And she did not know about that one. It was also the same day there was an issue on Lantern Hill, and this was last week when they had the high winds. She did agree. She did call me back, and she indicated that in speaking with her people, there was a particular person who's responsible for this area. He's a circuit leader or something like that, and he did agree that we had our share. So I do plan to monitor these. It's a little difficult because of the weather. I know this morning we had someone was out on, there was an isolated case on Baldwin Hill of an individual who was out, and there just happened to be a tree limb or something that came down. I think what we may be able to do, Mark Bancroft and I talked about it, is maybe use this as an incentive for them to maybe do more cutting of suspect limbs and trees along Gales Ferry and maybe get a little bit more attention. But I am going to keep on this to continue to let them know when we do have our outages. I met with Representative Reynolds, and one of the things that we did talk about is pursuing grants. We were notified about some. There's one that's called it's a Main Street project that I think you folks, we've had some correspondence back and forth. The big emphasis with these grants is they want to emphasize the jobs aspect of it. So if you can identify a project and say, well, this will create X number of jobs for a certain period of time, when you're looking at infrastructure, you're typically talking about short-term job creation, but again, that seems to be the emphasis. So I have some ideas on that. I will be coming to the next land use meeting to talk about some of those because our planner has the lead on these and putting these together, but I'd like to make sure that we do get our input. There are many things that we're starting to look at where we could use these grants, and in light of the fact that the steep grant for job lot is questionable, I'm assured that one way or another we're going to know by the end of the year, which is the end of this week. We were a little concerned when the governor came down here and went to Mobville and announced a $500,000 loan there, but did not come over here. But we're still optimistic that we will get that. But if that does not materialize, there are things that we feel we could do with some of these other smaller grants or similar grants. I signed an agreement for a small cities block development grant with an emphasis on housing rehabilitation. It is essentially a revolving loan that the town would get. The amount would be $300,000, and you could use that to lend to homeowners to do various types of upgrades to their homes. It's a loan that it's zero interest, and it basically becomes a lien against the house. When this was first envisioned, there was a preliminary application or notification that went out, and we got 21 applications for these that totaled well in excess of $300,000. We have a consultant that we're working with who really is going to do most of the work on this. At first I thought that we would actually have to do the screening and the choosing, but the consultant will actually go through, kind of qualify the people and look at the projects to make sure they meet the guidelines. For instance, one of the guidelines is that the equity in the house cannot be lower than Actually, state rules are 80 to 90%, which I'm surprised that high. I think they've said something a little lower of 60%. You obviously would not want to lend money to a homeowner who was underwater with little likelihood that you would get your money back. And if you can imagine looking around our town, this program has been in existence for 20 years. And if you looked at houses that may have been at 80 or 90% years ago and they lent money to them, the odds are the town would not get their money back. So again, it's a revolving loan. They're going to pre-qualify these. The emphasis of this is on code violations and health issues, so things like roofs, septic systems, and the like, that type of thing, and not necessarily improvements or upgrades like additions or whatever. Subject of Ledyard, I know you have it on your agenda. There was a meeting last Wednesday with all of the member towns. We met in East Lyme, and with the member towns, I think all of the member towns were there, the smaller member towns, with the exception of Preston, I'm sorry. And it was an opportunity for everyone to share their concerns with Ledyard. And it was a very frank discussion, and then at some point, Ledyard left, and the towns were able to have a discussion among themselves about what the course of action would be. The main issue is really the four towns, Franklin, North Stonington, Preston, and Stonington, that are looking for a health district because of either their own costs or because the state has given them an incentive to find a district. I can report to you that East Lyme met that evening or the next evening and took no action on Ledyard. So just another piece of information for you. I did discuss this morning with Ledyard the Parkwood homes, 7 and 9 Parkwood, and you're probably all aware of this. 7 has been remediated by the owner. 9 has been, the tenants have moved out. The home has been declared, unfit for habitation right now. I've asked them to send me the information on who the lien holder is on the house. Right now, Ledyard has essentially done their job, which is to force, in one case, remediation. In the other case, their position is, well, there's no problem anymore. There's no one in the house. I don't think that's an acceptable answer for the neighborhood. So they're going to send me the information they have on the lien holder, and I'd like to try to pursue that with the whether it be a bank or a mortgage company to see what we can do to get some action on that home to make it livable and marketable. Just along that line, I did send you an ordinance this morning because it did bring up the issue of blight, distressed premises. If you noticed on the front page of the Day today, there's an article about Stonington, their ordinance. I downloaded that from their site. It's something we really need to consider. There were a number of comments I've received in the past few months about the appearance of the town and condition of properties. And I know we've discussed blight ordinances and things like that. I think it's something that we really need to do in order to have a little bit more authority in dealing with some of the properties around town. It's a very interesting read, and I've seen some other similar ordinances that talk about similar issues. Retirement of our town clerk. This week's the last week for town clerk Calvin Brower. He has served our town for many years. He served as town clerk. I got to know him then and then when he worked for the council as the council clerk. He's given many years to the town. On behalf of the town, I thank him for his service. I know personally to me, he was a help to me in giving me guidance and just doing investigation. Town clerks can keep you honest, and that was a good thing. So we wish him well. This evening on your agenda, I am recommending the appointment of Mr. Mike Curley. I recommend him highly because of his years of service to the community and some of his involvement in commissions on government, his involvement in elections. But more than anything, in speaking with him, it's his vision of how to take that office forward. And that is why I would recommend him, and I would encourage the town council to engage him in conversation. I'm sure he would appreciate your thoughts, and I'm sure you would appreciate hearing his thoughts for what he would like to do in that position. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we have any questions for the mayor? Yes, Councilman.
Not a question, but just a comment. I did take a look at Stonington's ordinance, the stress premises ordinance. It's not unlike our draft January 28, 2010 Town of Ledyard blight ordinance that we held up on. And it is good timing to bring it back because there were two reasons we didn't go forward on it. One is that the zoning commission felt that their cease and desist ordinance would do the job. But since that time, we've really only had one case where they pursued a cease and desist. Now, it was successful, somewhat successful, right, Kevin?
Yeah.
So we were kind of waiting to see if, in fact, that ordinance did its thing. And since there seems to be a reluctance to file a cease and desist, perhaps it is time to look at the blight ordinance again. But the second reason was we were not sure about who the hearing officer would be. We didn't get warm and fuzzies from anybody. Everybody thought it was a great idea, but nobody wanted to be the ones to enforce it. So that was just one of the little problems we had with it. However, I would be very happy to hand over to Kevin, who's the new chair of land use, my research on the subject. So here you go, Kevin.
A little light reading for me.
But we're almost there. We're almost there.
I also looked at the proposed ordinance that you sent over, and of course, I also was familiar with the past ordinance that was submitted here in Ledyard for consideration. If you read the Stonington ordinance, they list several criteria that can be considered blight, but several of them are already covered in other procedures. They're okay if there's a fire and the fire marshal condemns it. If it's unsafe building structure, well, the building inspector already has the power under state statutes to go in and condemn something. So, I mean, there were several of those things that are listed there, which are already covered, and the only one it really adds. So, I mean, it has this whole list. The only one it really adds is trash. Okay, if there's a lot of trash in the yard, we can call that blight. Everything else is more or less covered somewhere else. So this is really an ordinance, that empowers the town to go in and clean up people's yards if they have trash laying all over their yard. And so, I mean, to me, that's really the essential question. As a town, do we want to be doing that? Do we want to be going in and cleaning up the trash that people leave around their yard with taxpayer dollars, and then using whatever power we've granted ourselves under this ordinance to try and reclaim that expenditure through liens and that sort of thing? And that's what it comes down to. Everything else is already covered somewhere else.
If I could just add
Sure.
to that. I was surprised to see in there that they didn't have anything about vegetation, because I know there are some. I thought I read one of them that actually defined the height of the grass or something like that. And my concern right now is not necessarily, habitated houses, but we have a large number of abandoned houses. And, I got several, as I said, over the past few months, I got several comments from individuals very, very concerned about the appearance and their own property values. And, again, there's some quite obvious cases. Blight is sometimes in the eye of the beholder. But I will say this. I'll make a deal with the council. You pass the ordinance, I'll get you an enforcement officer.
Okay, fair enough. Yes.
I read this ordinance as well, Stonington's ordinance, and I had two issues with it. First of all, let me say that I think something like this is probably quite necessary in this town. However, I had two issues with this, and the first was, it seems to me that this ordinance is aimed more at residential homeowners than at perhaps commercial property owners. And I think there's a bit more of a problem there necessarily with, economics and such than necessarily with the, this just your average homeowner. When I was out campaigning, I heard very little about the guy next door, and I heard a lot about various commercial enterprises and how come they look so terrible and how come we can't do anything about it. So I would like to see a little bit of a shift in any ordinance that would put more towards those kind of establishments. And secondly, and maybe I just missed this in here, but I'd be very concerned about remedy for homeowners, options that they'd have. I look at some of these things, as Sean brought out, a number of these items can be very subjective. And I would hate to see a homeowner getting slapped with, expensive repairs, expensive issues to deal with on his home, just because somebody decided they didn't like however they had their house appearing. I understand there are real concerns, there are real problems, there are real needs, things that have to be fixed. But we've seen all too often in this town when sometimes ordinances get passed just because someone doesn't like something, and that's inappropriate. So I would like to see some kind of measure put in for remedy for homeowners and caution for that sort of discrimination.
Okay. Are there other comments, questions for the mayor? Yes.
Well, data point regarding the power outage Gale last evening. Data point as you talked with CLMP. Power went out about 10:30. I made a call about 11:15, and I was the first notification to the CLMP that there was any power out anywhere. As I drove around, I located the fire department was on scene when the tree went down. I then, after that, went back, called, and still was the first person. So I'm not sure where the disconnect is, since I'm confident that the fire department, when they got there, somebody would have called CLMP to fix what was done. But somehow the 800 number call center that you call as a resident didn't have any idea that there was any power out anywhere in the town. So I'm not sure where the disconnect is, but that's just a data point where I was surprised that an hour into the event and the fire truck on scene actively engaged removing the tree, CLMP apparently had no idea what was going on.
That is an excellent point. Thank you for bringing that up, because I addressed that with Ms. Dunn. I had this vision in my head that CLMP had this big board in a room that had every house there, and as lights went out, maybe we've seen too many science fiction movies, and the lights start going out. CLMP has no clue as to when your electricity goes out, and they absolutely depend on citizens calling them, and they emphasize that quite a bit to me. And thank you for bringing that up, because I was waiting for the hurricanes, but in light of the fact that we're coming into snow season and stormy, windy season, I need to get notices out with the number on our website, and maybe others can help us to propagate that you must call a number. I'm just as you are. I never call CLMP because I look out the window, and if my neighbors were out, I figured, well, one of them must have called. So no sense me calling. But they depend. They literally will track every home, and then in most cases, or in many cases, you'll get a call back. Your light should have been back on, and so we need to get that out to the citizens that they need to call, because it can be very, very isolated. And our fire department isn't going to call them. That's not their business. They're just going to go and take care of it, or public works. They have to take care of what's their job. So that's an excellent point in terms of communication.
I guess I would question if the fire department in the middle of the night is showing up and pulling a tree off, that they wouldn't call CLMP to let them know that the tree was into the wires. I guess that was my question. Is I would have anticipated that somebody would have at least called and said, hey, we got a tree under the wires. It was 10:30 at night, 1 o'clock at night. So at least they're aware, and it's up to CLP whether they decide to do anything. So that communication between the emergency response, which was clearly adequate and on the scene, and the restoration, you remove the tree, but you haven't done anything to restore. Fire trucks clean up, they go away, and everybody wakes up at 6 o'clock in the morning to no power because there was no communication between the emergency services and CLP.
Yeah, that I don't understand because, and I don't think our fire people cut trees if they're blind. Our public works and fire people will not touch a tree without talking to CLP first. So, but again, they may tell them, hey, there's a tree down on this line, but that may not tell them who's without electricity, strange that may sound. So.
Which is the point of the disconnect between maybe it's in trouble with CLP where the fire department or emergency public works called CLP, but somehow that didn't reach across to a residential issue.
Any other comments? Yes.
And that phone number is 1-800-286-2000 to report a power outage.
1-800?
1-800-286-2000.
We will do a communications blitz in the next couple of weeks on
It's
this.
just the town of Ledyard. right?
No, that's CLP's power outage hotline.
Okay.
I have it on speed dial.
Something else very
Okay, any other comments, questions for the mayor? Okay, Roxanne, would you please take a referral to the Land Use Planning and Public Works Committee to consider possible action on a blight ordinance as per the mayor's communication. And lastly, Mr. Mayor, I want to note that we've gone 2 more weeks as mayor without any snow, so far, perfect record.
And none's on the horizon either.
Knock on wood. Okay, old business, item 1, finance. Is there a motion to remove from the table an amendment to the town's pension plan document?
I make the motion to remove from the table the motion to adopt the proposed amendment to section 5.07, 8-3 of the town's pension plan document is forwarded to the finance director's email dated December 13th, 2011.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, the motion is on removing from the table proposed amendment to the ordinance. Roxanne, please call the roll. Pardon?
You didn't approve the minutes.
Did I skip something?
It wasn't on the agenda.
It's not on the agenda.
Well, that's why I skipped it.
Oh,
Oh, no, you did skip it. It is on the agenda.
No,
Right after our comments.
Okay,
We
so
skipped way back when.
well,
Depends on what,
So which
what
version?
you're looking at.
well, we have a motion and a second. Can we handle that first? And then
Sure.
We'll go back to the minutes. Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Eichelberg,
Yes.
Mr. France,
Yes.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan.
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski.
Yes.
7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, the motion passes. The item will come off the table. Before we take that up, let's go back to minutes. Which minutes do we have?
We have December 14th special meeting minutes and the regular December 14th minutes.
Okay,
That was
and
the executive session for contracts and the regular agenda.
I understand. Is that on our agenda somewhere?
Well, it is, but it's not showing up on my thing here.
Okay, so
It's not showing up in the
No, no,
I'll tell you what, why don't we put that, we'll wait till we get to new business, we'll modify the agenda. We'll put approval of minutes on the
It
agenda.
was on the posted one. It's just not on the IT one for some
Oh,
reason.
okay.
It's
So
not
it-
showing up on there.
It's on the agenda, that's good. Well, do we have actual copies of the minutes?
John Marshall's has it.
Well, it's not going to have to
They
vote
were
it.
on the IT.
They're on the website.
They're on the website.
Okay, so for those watching and laughing, we are struggling here with the dichotomy between the actual printed agenda and the one that is showing up on our computer. Okay, so it's on the actual posted agenda, correct? All right, so it's on the agenda, and we don't need to modify the agenda here to take them up. And so we have approval of minutes. We have 2 minutes as called by Roxanne. Are there any comments, additions, corrections?
Do you have a mover or second?
I make a motion to approve the minutes, the special meeting minutes of December 14th, 2011, and the regular meeting minutes of December 14th, 2011.
Second.
Okay, Motion and a second. No discussion. Okay, Roxanne, call the roll.
Mr. France?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Yes.
Mr. Eichelberg?
Yes.
7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, the motion passes. Okay, now we are back to the, having taken the item off the table, finance, I will ask for consideration of the motion on the substance of the pension plan revision.
Make a motion to adopt the proposed amendment to Section 5.07, A, Tech 3, of the town's pension plan document is forwarded in the Finance Director's email dated December 13, 2011.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. For the benefit of people watching, would you remind everybody what the issue is about?
The issue before the council is a change to the existing plan. The existing plan had a penalty, if you will, for gap in service of for every quarter you were out, you lost a year of eligibility. The new wording, new language is 1 year for 1 year. So if you are service of the town and you depart for a period of time each year, you accrue against the time that you were working for the town. So example, if you worked for 8 years and you came back to work for the town in less than 8 years, then you would be fully restored to the full benefit that you accrued over that time. That's the gist of the change that we're
Okay. And so to remind everybody on the council, we actually have an employee who's retiring, whose retirement is imminent. That employee did have some broken service. When we reviewed the pension rules for that employee, we found out that they actually lost all of their service under the current rules because they were gone for a period of 4 years, which counted as 16 3-month periods in 4 years. And if we change it, then the employee gets the benefit of all the prior service as far as their pension is concerned. The reason why we did not act on this 2 weeks ago was because there was confusion about whether or not the amount of the pension is penalized based on the length of service. And my understanding is we have clarified that, and there's actually no penalty at all. The wording of the pension plan document, both as it had existed before and now, says if you meet the rule, then you get all of the service back. There's no reduction based on the length of time that you were away. It's basically a tripwire. If you meet the tripwire rule, you get everything back. And the previous tripwire, there was basically a 4-to-1 ratio. You had to have 4 times as much service as the length of time you were gone, and now it's simply a 1-to-1 ratio. That clear to everybody? Okay. Are there any other comments or discussion on the proposed amendment to the pension plan? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Roxanne, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Yes.
Mr. Eichelberg?
Yes.
Mr. France?
Yes.
7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, motion passes. Okay, the next item on the agenda, again, still under old business, is discussion and possible action regarding Ledyard's membership in the Regional Health District. Again, 2 weeks ago, we took this matter up with discussion. We decided to take no action for benefit of the people out there either watching on the camera or sitting here in the audience. There are 4 towns who are currently not members of any regional health district who are talking about trying to start a new one, and they are looking for both Ledyard and East Lyme to actually leave Ledyard and join the proposed new district. We've heard from Ledyard. Ledyard has proposed a flat budget that would be 0 increase. This follows a year when they had a 10% decrease last year in their budget in response to our urging that they actually take some tighter budget control. And so I sensed 2 weeks ago that there really was not a groundswell of support in the council to consider leaving Ledyard Light. Nonetheless, we brought it back on this agenda for 2 reasons. One, there's a statutory December 31st deadline for us to withdraw from Ledyard Light. Otherwise, we are bound to stay there for the following fiscal year that begins next July 1st. So it's either now or never in terms of withdrawing. Our next opportunity would be a year from now. The second reason was because we knew that there were further discussions that were occurring between the mayors and first selectmen of these various towns. The mayor made his report earlier that said he had some of those discussions. I didn't sense that there was any news out of that other than the news item that there was no news out of East Lyme. So with all that said, is there any other comments or discussion on the matter from the council? Mr. Mayor, did you want to have any opinion on the matter? Okay, councilors? If not, then I sense that no action is going to be taken. No motion has been made. And barring something really unforeseen in the next 3 days, we will remain members of Ledyard Light for the next year and a half. Okay, moving on in the agenda, before we get to new business, is there anyone who wishes to change or modify the agenda as it's written? Okay, if not, finance, item 1 under new business.
Motion to adopt the proposed ordinance creating a defined contribution plan for the town of Ledyard as contained in the draft dated December 12, 2001.
Second.
Okay, is there discussion? We heard earlier this evening at a public hearing about the proposed ordinance. For those people who are watching this meeting and did not see the public hearing, it was explained that the town is creating an ordinance to have a defined contribution plan as opposed to a defined benefit plan. Currently, most of the town's employees are on a defined benefit plan. That means that their pension is, when they leave, they get a pension that's a certain dollar amount, and then the town, based on how well our investments are doing in the pension plan, has to make a certain input every year to make sure that the employees can all get that amount. A defined contribution plan works differently. It is a 401k plan where the employee puts in a certain amount, the town matches that amount, and then depending upon how the investments do, the employee gets out a return based on those investments. So the town's contribution is defined up front as opposed to years down the line. It's basically better for the town. Now, new hires for the town in management, we expect will be put under the defined contribution plan. There is one new employee that is already under it. For all bargaining unit members, they may or may not come under this new plan based on how this negotiations go over collective bargaining agreements. Certainly, we wanted to have a plan created so we had something to go to if those negotiations would yield moving any of the employees or possibly new hires over to this defined plan. Okay, so that's the background. Is there any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. I did want to say one thing, and I am going to refer this back to administration. I'm prepared to support this tonight, but the ordinance as drafted does have some provisions in it that says, okay, we're going to have this other plan document, and it says the plan document is going to meet, it's going to agree with some of the details in the ordinance. So, for example, the ordinance does talk about vesting rights and the like. And I personally just don't like that. It's my, I don't know, I'm looking over here, I really want to look at admin. It's my personal opinion that we should not have details in the ordinance and in the plan. Because the ordinance says the plan's got to agree with the ordinance. Well, okay, that's great. Then what if we make a mistake? For example, before the proposed change, and this is dated December 12th, I'm sorry, is that the right date, or do we need to modify it?
Today's date, 28.
Okay, so we do need to modify that. We'll come back to that in a minute. But it was changed today to change the trustees, and before that change, we did actually have a disagreement between the plan document that was proposed and the ordinance. So if you just make a mistake, or if you subsequently change the plan document, and you end up with the ordinance and the plan document out of balance, then we just create this confusion. Which are we following? So there's various ways to handle that administratively. I mean, right now, I think they're in agreement, so I don't see a problem with passing this as is. I'm going to refer it back to admin to just consider that. There's various ways to do it. One way is to take all of the detail out of the ordinance, just refer to the plan document, or you put a statement in there that says what wins if there is a conflict. So with that, referred back to admin. And the second thing, I guess, is we need do I have a friendly amendment to change the date of the draft to today's date, December 28th, 2011? Yes? Yes. Okay, friendly amendment to change the date of the draft to reflect today's date. Okay, so we have a motion and a second as amended. Roxanne, please call the roll.
Mrs. McGrattan?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Yes.
Mr. Eichelberg?
Yes.
Mr. France?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda, I will move to approve the mayor's appointment of a town clerk in accordance with Chapter 6, Section 2 of the town charter, as stated in his letter dated December 27th, 2011, appointing Mr. Michael Curley to replace Mr. Cal Brower.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. The mayor spoke of Mr. Curley earlier. Mr. Curley is here in the audience tonight. Welcome. And I assume that you have indicated to the mayor that you are willing to serve. If you get this appointment. Well, I thank you for your willingness to serve. Do we have any comments or questions from the councilors? I think it was indicated that we wanted to inquire of Mr. Curley. He's available.
Good choice.
Okay, well, I know Mr. Curley and have known him for many years through his work in several areas, and I think he's a great choice. I think he will serve the town very well, and I know he works very hard at every task he undertakes.
I'll ask a question, since somebody should ask a question, right? Mike, what question would you have liked us to ask that we didn't ask?
Probably the question I've asked myself, what is our vision for the town clerk's office? And I would propose that it would be that we make Ledyard's town clerk office the most efficient, the most friendly, and the most trusted due to the quality of its work in the state of Connecticut. And that's kind of where I see us heading, and with your help and all the townspeople, I think we can get there. And to build on what we have and just move it forward to be the best.
Just sort of a comment, but my opinion is that as much as possible, things should be moving to be online or available to the town. I see a big smile on your face, so I'm sure you have an opinion on that subject, but with today's technology, we should be able to make most documents, things available, even if they're blank forms that need to be filled out. They should be available so that people can access them from their home, wherever they have a computer and printer, as necessary. They may still need to come into the office for official records, but to not have that available sometimes I just find very frustrating. And my opinion is that our town clerk's office has been in the information technology dark ages for some period of time. Mr. Eichel?
Mr. Curley, I'd just like to know how this is going to impact your involvement with Republican Corn Dog Booth.
I think I will have to reluctantly transfer my responsibilities. Perhaps you'd be willing to undertake that as the chief corn doggy.
That's a lowercase p on that, perhaps.
Yes,
I have
ma'am.
a question. I don't know what the number is, but there are people in town who do not have computers, and probably a lot of senior citizens. How are you going to handle that?
Well, again, that will require your support. I'm going to come up with the mayor and his staff on ways to get the information out, either perhaps at the polling places, perhaps in the mayor's newsletter, the Parks and Recs newsletter, any the community centers, the libraries. I've been looking at other websites and meeting with other town clerks around the state. There's a wealth of things we can, low-hanging fruit, we can just bring into Ledyard, whether it's on the websites or other ideas. So it just kind of takes a will to get it done, and we've got the will to do it.
Okay.
So we'll do it.
Welcome aboard, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think Councilor Eichelberg just foreshadowed the vote. Nevertheless, we'll take it anyway. Mr. Roxanne, please call the roll.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Yes.
Mr. Eichelberg?
Yes.
Mr. France?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan?
Yes.
7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion passes. And that completes the agenda for tonight.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Without objection, we are adjourned at 7:47. Gavel.